You're not a negative person, you're just carrying messages no one taught you how to read. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever had a moment, maybe in the middle of the night or right before something important, when your mind whispered, "You're not enough. They'll see through you. Why are you even trying?" You didn't invite those thoughts in. They just showed up, unannounced, unrelenting. And maybe, like most people, you fought them. You told yourself, "Stay positive." You tried to push them out, to replace them with nicer ones. You got angry at your own mind, wondering, why do I keep thinking like this? What's wrong with me? But what if I told you? You've been fighting the wrong battle? You see, Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in modern psychology, didn't see negative thoughts as enemies. He saw them as messengers. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your fear, your doubt, your self-criticism, they are not proof that you're broken. They're signs, clues, a language your unconscious is speaking, and no one ever taught you how to listen. We are all taught how to perform strength, how to smile through the pain, how to chant affirmations until we're hoarse. But no one ever tells us how to sit with what hurts, to face it with curiosity instead of fear. That's where transformation begins. Because the thoughts that haunt you, they're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to show you what you haven't healed yet. And in the next segment, I'm going to prove to you, thought by thought, layer by layer, that your mind is not a battlefield. It's a roadmap. But first, you have to learn how to read it. Every negative thought is a fragment of you that was silenced too soon. So now that you know these thoughts aren't random, let's go deeper. Let's take one of the most common thoughts people have. I'm not good enough. Now, pause. Don't fight it. Don't correct it with a fake, "I am enough." Instead, ask it, where did you come from? Because that thought didn't just appear one day. It was planted. Maybe by a parent who only gave you love when you performed well. Maybe by a teacher who made you feel small in front of a crowd. Maybe by a friend, or a partner, or a system that never saw your worth unless you proved it over and over again. Carl Jung would call this a shadow fragment, a disowned part of you. A part that you've pushed so far down, it now speaks in whispers you don't understand, or worse, screams you can't shut off. And here's the key. The more you suppress it, the louder it becomes. The more you avoid it, the more power it holds over you. That's why your attempts to stay positive often fail. Because positivity that's built on top of buried shame will always crumble. It's like building a house on sand and wondering why it keeps sinking. Real change begins when you turn inward, not to fight those thoughts, but to meet them. Because behind every painful belief is an origin story, a moment in time, a younger version of you that never got to speak. And in the next segment, I'll show you exactly how to have that conversation. How to stop reacting and start reclaiming the narrative your unconscious has been trying to tell you for years. You don't heal by running away from the voice in your head. You heal when you turn around and ask it why it's there. Let's be honest. You've probably tried everything. Mantras, vision boards, positive self-talk. But deep down, that same old voice always comes back. You're not smart enough. You're a burden. They're going to leave you. You'll mess this up, like always. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. You can't heal what you refuse to face. And you can't face what you never understand. This is where Jung's work becomes more than theory. He wasn't interested in surface-level optimism. He wanted integration, bringing the unconscious to light. And you can start that right now. Here's a simple but powerful exercise. Write down your loudest negative thought. Don't edit. Don't sugarcoat. Just write the raw line that plays in your mind, exactly as it shows up. Now, imagine that thought as a person sitting across from you. What do they look like? What age are they? Are they scared? Angry? Desperate? Ask them 3 questions. Where did you come from? What are you afraid will happen if I don't listen to you? What are you trying to protect me from? And then, just sit. Listen. Let that part of you speak. It might say, "I was born when your dad walked away without saying goodbye. I'm here to keep you from being embarrassed again. If you fail, I want you to fail early, so it won't hurt as much." And suddenly, that cruel voice in your head? It stops being a monster. It becomes a scared child. A tired protector. A misunderstood fragment of who you used to be, still stuck in survival mode. This is not imagination. This is the beginning of self-trust. Because when you stop treating your thoughts like enemies, you begin to see them for what they really are. Old scripts, still running. But you're no longer that same character. And in the next part, We'll go even further. I'll show you how to reframe and transform those inner voices using one of Jung's most powerful methods, active imagination. The closer you get to growth, the louder the voice of fear becomes. Here's a strange truth that no one warns you about. The moment you start changing, your mind will try to stop you. You finally set boundaries with someone who's been draining you for years. Suddenly your brain whispers, "You're being selfish. You'll end up alone." You take a bold step toward a dream, and your thoughts strike back. "Who do you think you are? You're going to mess this up." You see, we often think negativity means something is wrong. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He believed that when we begin to shed old patterns and move toward our true self, the ego, that internal version of who we think we are, starts to panic. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These thoughts aren't proof that you're broken. They're proof that the old identity is resisting change. Because let's face it, even pain can feel safe when it's familiar. And the ego, it loves what's familiar. It would rather keep you small, predictable, comfortable, than risk the unknown that comes with growth. So what do? You recognize the fear for what it is. Not a stop sign, but a signal that you're entering sacred territory. The space where you start becoming someone new. And that's why, in the next segment, we'll dive into two powerful Jungian concepts. Persona, the mask you've been wearing to be accepted. And shadow, the raw, buried truth underneath it. Because once you see how they've been playing tug-of-war inside you, you'll finally understand why your mind speaks the way it does. And how to take your power back. The mask you wear to survive is the reason you feel like you're dying inside. Carl Jung called it the persona. The social mask you put on every day to fit in. To be loved. To be safe. It's the you who always smiles. Even when you're falling apart. The you who's agreeable, responsible, selfless, even when your boundaries are being trampled. The you who says, "I'm fine," when what you really mean is, "I'm screaming on the inside." But the more perfect your mask becomes, the more buried your real self gets. And behind that mask, that's where the shadow lives. The shadow is the part of you were told was too much. Too angry, too sensitive, too selfish, too needy, too wild. So you shoved it down, locked it away, and called it weakness. But here's the catch Jung discovered. Whatever you repress in the unconscious will come back as fate. In other words, the shadow never dies. It just changes form. It shows up as anxiety you can't explain. Self-sabotage at the worst possible moment. A voice in your head that says, "You're a fraud. You'll never be enough. You don't deserve peace." Not because those things are true, but because they are echoes of the parts you refused to integrate. You've spent years building a persona that looks acceptable, but your shadow has spent just as many years trying to be seen. And the tension between the two? That's where your most painful thoughts are born. So no, you're not weak. You're not broken. You're just split in two. And until you stop living only for the persona, you'll never feel whole. That's why, in the next segment, we'll explore what it really means to make peace with your shadow. Not just in theory, but in a way that actually sets you free. You don't need to silence the voice in your head. You need to change the way you respond to it. If your shadow is the part of you you've spent years ignoring, then your thoughts, especially the painful ones, are how that shadow screams for your attention. But here's the truth no one teaches us. You can't kill the shadow, but you can give it a voice. And when you do, it stops fighting you. It starts guiding you. Let's start with something simple but powerful. Take the most familiar negative thought you have. Something that keeps looping. Maybe it's, "I always mess things up. People always leave me. I'm too much. I'll never be enough." Now, instead of trying to overpower it with fake positivity, sit down with it like it's an old friend. Seriously. Imagine writing it a letter. Not to reject it, but to listen. Write, "I hear you. I know you've been showing up for years. You probably started when I was, 8, 13, 22? Maybe someone made me feel that way. Maybe the world did, and you were just trying to protect me. But now, I don't need you to scream anymore. I'm here. I've got this. And I choose a different voice now." Do you see what you've just done? You didn't reject your shadow. You didn't stuff it back down. You met it, heard it, and reclaimed the authority to speak for yourself, not from fear, but from conscious choice. Carl Jung believed this was the beginning of true power. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. And now that you've removed the disguise, you're ready to meet yourself. In part 3, we'll take this even deeper. You'll learn how to use Jung's tool of active imagination to go beyond thoughts and actually dialogue with the parts of you that have been stuck in survival for years. That's where the transformation truly begins. If you want to stop fighting your mind, you have to learn how to speak its language. Most people try to outthink their thoughts. They use logic to debate emotions. They throw affirmations at pain, hoping it'll shut up. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your unconscious doesn't respond to logic. It responds to symbols, images, metaphors, and stories. This is where Carl Jung's method of active imagination becomes life-changing. Unlike meditation, where you try to silence the mind, active imagination asks you to enter the chaos and talk to it. Let me show you how. Step into the process. It begins like this. Close your eyes. Take a breath. Now imagine the thought that's been haunting you the most. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's a memory that still burns. Now, give it a form. Let your mind create the image. Don't force it. Maybe your fear looks like a shadowy figure at the edge of a cliff. Maybe your shame is a young version of yourself, sitting alone in a school hallway. Maybe your self-hate takes the shape of a critical parent, a smirking voice, or a masked version of you. Now, speak to it, out loud or in your mind. Ask, why are you here? What are you afraid of? What do you need from me to feel safe? And then, just listen. At first, it might feel awkward, or silent, or strange, but if you stay, truly stay, something inside will respond. A whisper, a memory, a single sentence you didn't expect. And in that moment, you're no longer trapped inside the thought. You're outside of it, talking with it. That's how healing begins. You're not just thinking differently. You're building a relationship with the part of you that's been screaming to be understood. In the next segment, we'll go deeper. I'll walk you through what to do when those voices resist. When your shadow fights back. When your imagination takes you to places that scare you. And how to turn those moments into the fuel for transformation. When the shadow fights back, you're finally getting close. Let's be real. When you try to dialogue with the parts of you that hurt, they don't always answer with peace and gratitude. Sometimes they scream. Sometimes they shut down. Sometimes they throw back the ugliest things you've ever heard. You're disgusting. You'll always be alone. You don't deserve love, not from anyone. It's jarring. It hurts. And your first instinct might be to stop, to run from the voice like you always have. But here's what Carl Jung would want you to remember. The shadow is not evil. It simply contains what the ego has rejected. So when it lashes out at you, it's not because it hates you. It's because for years, it's been denied a voice. For years, that part of you had no one to speak for it. So now, when given a chance, it doesn't know how to ask gently. It screams. It claws. It resists. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're finally doing it right. Here's what to do when resistance shows up. Stay grounded. Feel your feet. Feel your breath. You are safe now, even if a part of you still believes it's back in the past. Don't argue with the voice, ask it questions. Instead of saying, "That's not true," say, "Where did you first hear that? Whose voice does that sound like? What would you say if I told you I don't believe that anymore?" Offer compassion, even when it feels fake. Say, "You don't have to protect me like this anymore. I see you now. You can rest." These aren't just words. They're spells, breaking the old trance that kept you stuck. This is how you rewrite the script that's been playing in your unconscious for years. Not with force, not with denial, but with courageous listening. And it's here, in this emotional fire, that you begin to transmute pain into personal power. In the next and final segment of this part, I'll show you how to take everything you've uncovered and begin building a new relationship with your mind. One rooted not in fear, but in integration. You don't need a new mind. You need a new relationship with the one you already have. So what happens after you've faced the voice? After you've listened to the anger, the shame, the fear, and stayed with it? What happens when the screaming softens? When the shadow looks back at you not with rage, but with exhaustion? That's the moment most people miss. Because healing isn't just about surviving the storm inside your head. It's about what you choose to build after the storm ends. Carl Jung believed that the goal of inner work was not perfection. It was wholeness. To become someone who doesn't just manage their thoughts, but walks through life with a quiet power that says, I know who I am, even when the voices come back. And they will come back. That voice of fear? That whisper of, you're not enough. That old wound that still aches? They're not gone forever. But here's the difference now. They don't get to drive anymore. They don't get to run your life. They become part of your story, not the one writing it. How do you keep that power? You build a new agreement with your mind. You say to it every day, you're allowed to speak, but I choose how to respond. You're allowed to fear, but I choose to act with courage. You're allowed to feel, but I choose not to run. That is integration. That is what it means to live as a whole human being. Not someone free from darkness, but someone who knows how to dance with it. And maybe that's the ultimate freedom Jung wanted us to find. Not the illusion of silence, but the strength to hear everything within you, and still walk forward with clarity, purpose, and peace. We'll bring everything together, the shadow, the fear, the thoughts, the transformation, and you'll hear one final truth that most people never realize. Your thoughts were never the problem. Your disconnection from yourself was. And now that you're reconnecting, you're no longer just surviving, you're awakening. Maybe it was never about silencing your thoughts, but reconnecting with the self that was silenced along the way. Let's slow down for a moment. Take a breath. Think back to every harsh thought you've ever had. Every time your mind told you, you're failing, you'll never be loved, you don't belong. You've probably spent years believing those voices were the problem. That if you could just stop thinking that way, everything would be okay. But what if those thoughts were never the true enemy? What if the real wound wasn't the voice, but how far you had to disconnect from yourself to survive? You see, Carl Jung didn't just talk about the shadow to make people feel seen. He taught it because he believed something deeper. We all walk around with parts of ourselves we've buried, and we spend our lives unconsciously trying to find them again. That's why your thoughts feel so heavy, so loud, so overwhelming. You were never lost, just disconnected from the part of you that always knew the way. You've just taken a journey most people never dare to. Not because they can't, but because it's easier to scroll, to numb, to pretend. But you stayed, you listened, you faced the part of yourself that's been waiting in the dark. And that's not small, that's heroic. So now, the choice is yours. You can close this video and go back to distraction, or you can pause, just for one moment, and ask yourself, what part of me did I hear the loudest today? What part of me is finally ready to be seen? Because this journey isn't about changing who you are. It's about becoming who you were before the world taught you to hide. And if something inside you knows that, if a quiet voice just whispered, yes, then I invite you to stay with this channel. This is not where you come for quick hacks or empty motivation. This is where you come to remember yourself. Candle, so if that speaks to you, subscribe. Share this with someone who's hurting in silence. And most of all, start walking with your shadow. Not ahead of it, not behind it, with it. Because the path to wholeness doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks that you finally stop running from who you are. Because they're carrying pieces of your story you were never allowed to tell. Moments you were never allowed to grieve. Feelings you were never allowed to feel. They are not poison. They are postcards from your past, sent forward by a part of you who still believes you're not safe enough to be your whole self. And every time you try to just be positive, you send that message right back unopened. But not anymore. Not after this. Because now, you don't just hear the voice, you understand it. You don't just react to the pain, you face it. You don't just suppress your shadow, you walk beside it. And that changes everything. In the next segment, I'll show you how to carry this awareness into real life, into your relationships, your choices, your daily battles, so that the voice inside your head finally becomes what it was always meant to be. A guide, not a judge. A mirror, not a prison. Real healing doesn't happen in the mind. It happens in how you live after meeting your mind honestly. So the question becomes, now that you've faced the voice, now that you've seen the shadow, what do you do with that awareness? Because healing isn't just what happens in a quiet room with a journal and a cup of tea. It's what happens when you walk back into the real world. The workplace, the arguments, the temptations, the triggers, and you show up differently. That's how integration becomes transformation. Carl Jung didn't want you to just understand yourself. He wanted you to live as someone who was no longer at war within. So how do you live like that? It starts with this. You stop acting from the wound. You start acting from the witness. Let me explain. You will still feel the fear. You will still hear the old voices. You will still get triggered. But now, instead of obeying them, you pause. You say, this is the part of me that was abandoned. This is the part that got rejected. This is the story I used to lie from, but I don't have to anymore. And from that pause, you choose a different response. You speak your truth in a moment when the old you would have gone silent. You hold your boundary when the old you would have collapsed. You soften when the old you would have attacked. That's the moment you realize you're not healing to become someone else. You're healing to finally become who you were before the world taught you to split in half. This is the quiet power Jung was pointing to all along. Not the absence of struggle, but the ability to show up every day with a little more clarity, a little more courage, a little more choice. In the next and final segment, we'll bring everything home. You'll hear one last truth. The one thing most people never realize about their negative thoughts, and the gift that was hidden inside them all along. Your negative thoughts were never trying to break you, they were trying to bring you home. So here you are, after all the spirals, all the resistance, all the old voices telling you who you should be. You've come to this place. Still breathing, still here, and maybe, for the first time, you're not trying to silence anything anymore. You're not fighting yourself. You're just listening. Like an old friend finally picking up the phone after years of silence. And when you really listen, you hear it. Your thoughts were never trying to punish you. They were trying to protect you. In all the wrong ways. Maybe, but with the best intention a wounded self could offer. That shame you've carried? It was a wall, built so no one could hurt you again. That self-doubt? It was armor, forged in childhood to keep disappointment out. That fear? It was a compass, pointing you away from more pain, even if it meant keeping you small. But now, you don't need walls. You don't need armor. You don't need to shrink. Because you, the real you, has returned. Carl Jung didn't teach this work to make people feel better. He taught it so they could become whole. Not flawless, not endlessly positive, but complete. I'd rather be whole than good, he said, and maybe that's what you've been chasing all along. Not peace in the absence of conflict, but peace in the presence of self. So let this be your new beginning. Not a vow to never have negative thoughts again, but a commitment to never abandon yourself when they come. To pause, to listen, to speak gently, and then to walk forward. Not as a war zone of voices, but as one voice, unified, yours. If this journey has opened something in you, stay close. There's more to explore, more to reclaim, more of you to come home to. Because the journey never really ends. But now, you don't have to walk it alone anymore. You were never lost, just disconnected from the part of you that always knew the way. You've just taken a journey most people never dare to. Not because they can't, but because it's easier to scroll, to numb, to pretend. But you stayed, you listened, you faced the part of yourself that's been waiting in the dark. And that's not small, that's heroic. So now, the choice is yours. You can close this video and go back to distraction, or you can pause, just for one moment, and ask yourself, what part of me did I hear the loudest today? What part of me is finally ready to be seen? Because this journey isn't about changing who you are. It's about becoming who you were before the world taught you to hide. And if something inside you knows that, if a quiet voice just whispered, yes, then I invite you to stay with this channel. This is not where you come for quick hacks or empty motivation. This is where you come to remember yourself. So if that speaks to you, subscribe, share this with someone who's hurting in silence. And most of all, start walking with your shadow. Not ahead of it, not behind it, with it. Because the path to wholeness doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks that you finally stop running from who you are.